Mesdames et messieurs, il me fait plaisir de vous présenter notre nouveau chef d'état-major de la Défense, le général Thomas Lawson. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and privilege to invite our new Chief of the Defense Staff, General Thomas Lawson, to address this gathering.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellencies, Prime Minister and Mrs. Harper, Minister and Mrs. McKay, Minister Valcourt, Deputy Minister Fonberg, distinguished guests, of whom there are so many, members of the Canadian Armed Forces, ladies and gentlemen, speaking after the esteemed leadership of our great nation and Walt Natinchuk, it may be the best job in the CF, Walt, but it sure starts out tough. Ladies and gentlemen, before I have a few words, I'd like to first introduce you to my mother, who's here. She's now 90 years young and sitting amongst her family, very proud. She, 2 years ago, completed the downhill portion of her skiing career, and I'm pretty sure she would have driven herself here if she hadn't got an offer from my sisters to bring her. Mom, so proud of you. Thanks for taking the time out of your schedule. Ladies and gentlemen, as has happened to me several times in my military career, I'm struck by the historical events that bring us together here today. And in the nearly 50 years since the position of Chief of Defense Staff was stood up, ceremonies like this one here this morning have taken place 17 times. I hadn't actually thought about that too much until a legacy dinner at Royal Military College a few weeks ago, and I was approached by a former Chief of Defense Staff, Ramsey Withers, looking like he could still lead the forces with energy today. And he came up to me and he said, welcome, number 18, I'm number 6. So there you go. I'm number 18. That's the number you're going to be seeing me put on the back of any sports jerseys I buy in coming years. Nous voici donc, je suis le numéro 18.
So I am number 18.
And I'm humbled by the great company I joined many former Chiefs of Defense Staff here today, and by the challenge of the task at hand to follow the inspirational example set by my classmate, mentor, friend, General Walt Natinchuk. Or as General Ramsey Withers would call him, old number 17. Ladies and gentlemen, the Canadian military is, by some of our allies and friends standards, small. We prefer to characterize ourselves as sleek and agile. Le résultat fait en sorte que nous avons le luxe
the result is
de
that
bien
we
se
have
connaître
the
à travers
luxury
tout
of
grade
knowing each
et
other
tout
well all across
environnement
all the
confondu,
levels in the
ce que peu
Canadian
de forces
forces,
accomplissent.
something that few forces
Our
are able to
sleekness is
do.
one of the reasons we have so many touching stories of family links and ties among our members. For instance, companies and units now led by the son, once led by the father, or today's Royal Canadian Navy, now led by younger brother, Vice Admiral Paul Madison, once led by older brother Greg. Amazing things like that. In my own family, I've experienced several of the same sort of exhilarating connection. For example, my father, George Lawson, who passed away 2 years ago at the age of 90, was a fighter reconnaissance pilot in the Second World War, ending his time in England with 414 Squadron, after which this squadron, like many wartime units, was stood down. Fast forward 65 years, and the Air Force again was able to bring 414 back into service at a memorable event in Gatineau at Michael Potter's hangar in 2009. And here's the moment to which I refer. I look to my right as a spectator in the crowd to see my son, now in uniform, leading the color party as one of the first members of the newly stood-up 414 Squadron, and then back to my left to see my father beaming proudly as the guest of honor at that parade as a former wartime member of 414.
And I have to say that only the Canadian forces can provide us with those moments of pride.
Ladies and gentlemen, I feel I owe the Canadian forces so much. I'd like to say I joined this profession with grand thoughts of the defense of the nation, foremost in my mind, but that would not be strictly true. I joined
the Canadian forces with the idea of defending the nation would not be entirely true.
Who might even say defense of the nation was one of the last things in my mind as I headed down to Kingston when I joined this great profession. They'd likely remind me that it had been my plan to head to the Royal Military College for 1 year which the color brochures said came without commitment, and then to rejoin my buddies back at whatever institution would accept us all. The problem with such a cunning plan, of course, and the recruiters know it very well, is that once in, the CF grows on you. Its culture, its people, and eventually even the belief of higher concepts like defense of the nation. On s'imprègne facilement de la culture des forces canadiennes, de son
easily become
entourage,
involved
ces gens,
with the CF
au point
culture
d'inspirer des
and
plus grands
inspired
concepts tels
by
que
the
la
people
défense de
and
notre
the
nation.
concept
These
of the
things
defense
actually
of the
become
nation.
woven into the fabric of our members and our culture and speak to the successes experienced and achieved by the Canadian Forces in our nation's history. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last 30-some years, my own career has involved 16 moves. Some civilians are nodding their heads going, wow, a whole bunch of military are going, 16? You got lucky. But you know, my wife Kelly and I wouldn't change a thing. During these diverse tours across our nation and abroad, we brought up our 3 boys, of whom we're now so very proud, and watched them all thrive through their many schools and sets of friends. And you know, funny thing, even though we were never posted back to our hometown of Toronto, all 3 boys grew up cheering and suffering with the ups and downs of their beloved Toronto Maple Leafs. Some things just run in the blood. In fact, they had the chance this morning to meet Mr. Brian Burke, who's going to change all those things in the future. Même en joignant une organisation à l'adolescence, et quand on se retrouve à 35 années de service, on s'imagine bien que l'aventure va se terminer bientôt. Last year, when the CDS asked me to go to NORAD in Colorado, Kelly seemed a little bit disappointed that the roots that had started to grow deeper into the Ottawa soil would have to be pulled up. But again, what a tremendous year that turned out to be, working alongside our great American friends and allies on some of the most strategic issues facing our 2 nations today. Well, sweetheart, the adventure's going to last a little bit longer. L'aventure ne fait que débuter.
The adventure's only beginning.
Ladies and gentlemen, Canadian Forces members have so many links like mine and like Walt's that tie our past to our future, and that's why having today's ceremony in this incredible Canadian War Museum is so fitting. In everything we do, we take measure of the lessons provided us by our military forefathers, and we use these lessons as best we can to prepare ourselves for challenges that are sure to come. As we take stock of where the Canadian Forces and Canada and our allies are today, we see the tremendous united effort in Afghanistan beginning a period of refocus as Afghans themselves take over the responsibilities of their own security. Though this will not be an easy process, it's an important one, and there's much room for optimism. Over 900 Canadian Forces members are in Kabul right now, continuing to work hard to that end. With the completion of combat operations in both Afghanistan and Libya, the Canadian Forces will study and incorporate the lessons that we see there to prepare for the challenges that are certain to face us ahead. But the operational excellence that has characterized the Canadian Forces of today will continue to be the hallmark and the basis for the future successes we will see. Vous savez, la réputation d'excellence de nos forces canadiennes nous va bien. Ce saut de qualité est la base fondamentale pour nos succès.
That quality is the basis of our future success.
Your Excellency, Prime Minister Harper, Minister McKay, I dedicate myself, in full view of the responsibilities of command, to accepting your confidence today. I dedicate myself to the care and well-being of the members of the Canadian Armed Forces. I dedicate myself to providing the highest quality military advice that you will seek. And I dedicate myself and the Canadian Forces team to the careful maintenance of the many military capabilities that will be required to defend our great nation. I provide these pledges with the comfort that accompanies my confidence in the General and Flag Officers of the Canadian Forces, in our highly experienced officer cadre and non-commissioned officers, in our wonderful public service partners led by the Deputy Minister, Rob Fonberg, and in the tremendous underlying strength, resilience, and professionalism of the Canadian soldier, sailor, airman, and airwoman. And finally, in the terrific support that you and the people of our nation have provided to their Canadian Armed Forces and will continue to provide to their Canadian Armed Forces. Thank you. Merci beaucoup.